The father brought a woman home early in the morning. His son hastily kowtowed and called out, "Mother!" Could it be that the boy had mistaken her for someone else? She herself had been betrothed to the eldest son of a high-ranking court official. But before the wedding night could even take place, her husband had passed away. Still very young, she became a widow. Her mother-in-law always found her to be an eyesore, scolding her harshly at the slightest thing. Today was the anniversary of her late husband's death, the day to go to the temple to offer incense. This was the only day of the year she could leave the house and breathe fresh air. Seeing the bustling streets, she quickly forgot the sadness of being scolded that morning. She and her nursemaid strolled along, admiring the city, and soon arrived at the temple. After paying her respects to the old abbot, she was about to go inside when she came across a group of people fighting. A young man was thrown from the shop by a burly man, landing right at her feet and lying motionless. Suddenly, everything fell silent. Everyone thought the young man was dead. She, too, was frightened and quickly stepped back. Only then did the young man suddenly open his eyes wide, scramble to his feet, and pull open his shirt, revealing a muscular chest. This caused everyone to blush. The nursemaid couldn't help but offer a word of praise. This young man's name was Ba Wu. Several years ago, his wife had run off in the night with his friend, her whereabouts unknown, leaving behind a son for him to raise. Together with a widowed man named Chun Bi from the same village, he spent his days idle with nothing to do. If they weren't helping others collect debts, they were kidnapping widows. Widows having feelings for other men was unacceptable. But if a man fell in love with a widow, he would pay to have her kidnapped and brought to his home, so they could live together. Sometimes the two would come to love each other. Other times it would be a forced situation. However, once a widow was forcibly taken, she could never return. In that feudal era of male dominance, a woman's purity was paramount, and the right to choose lay entirely in the hands of men. Chun Bi had received a new job. An old man had set his sights on a certain widow. Initially, Ba Wu was reluctant. He felt that if the two weren't happy, it would ruin the woman's life. However, he couldn't resist the high price the old man offered. The two immediately agreed, planning to kidnap the widow. Late at night, Chun Bi drank some wine while waiting for Ba Wu. Upon arriving, he couldn't remember whether it was the family on the right or the family on the left. This infuriated Ba Wu, who scolded Chun Bi. Chun Bi climbed the wall and looked inside. In the garden, there was a woman wearing mourning clothes, no mistake, it was this house. So Ba Wu climbed over the wall, leaving Chun Bi outside to keep watch. From a distance, Ba Wu saw a woman in white holding a lantern and walking towards him. He hid in a corner, and when the woman discovered him, she had a sack thrown right over her head. Ba Wu hoisted her onto his shoulder and ran. The woman inside the house heard the commotion and ran out, shouting loudly, "Thief!" Ba Wu carried the woman on his shoulder and fled as quickly as he could. He ran to the front gate, where he rejoined Chun Bi. Chun Bi led the way, carrying the widow to the front of a household. Someone was waiting at the door. Just as they were about to step forward, they saw two doctors rushing over. It turned out the people standing in front of the door weren't waiting for them. The doctors hurriedly ran into the house and closed the door. The two of them stood outside, unsure what to do. Chun Bi told Ba Wu to take the woman back first, while he went to gather information. Ba Wu carried the woman back to his house. His son, Cha Dal, saw his father carrying someone, but while his father was outside, he secretly opened the sack and saw a woman's legs inside. He was instantly thrilled. Finally, his father had come to his senses and brought a mother home for him. As for Ba Wu, he was deeply troubled. The person who hired him had died, so he had to bring the person he was carrying back. But unexpectedly, it was easier to invite a god than to send one away. Ba Wu had helped an old man kidnap a widow, and he was about to take her to the old man's house when he heard that the old man had died. With no other choice, he had to carry her back home for the time being. His son, Cha Dal, smiled widely as he looked at the kidnapped woman, mistakenly believing that his father had helped him find a mother, and was overjoyed. He knelt down and called her mother. While the father didn't seem to appreciate her beauty or show her any tenderness, his son was different. The boy really liked this new mother and decided to untie her. However, upon closer inspection, it seemed like he had seen this mother somewhere before. After thinking carefully, he remembered seeing a beautiful and refined woman at the temple yesterday when he was playing. At the time, he had wished that that woman could be his mother. The young monk next to him told him not to say such things, that the woman was actually Princess Su Kyung, the only daughter of King Gwanghegan. Oh my gosh, his father was really daring. He had actually kidnapped Princess Su Kyung. Princess Su Kyung was involved in a political marriage. Her father, the king, had married her off to the son of a high-ranking official. The wedding hadn't even taken place yet, and the wedding night hadn't even happened, but she had already become a widow. At that moment, Ba Wu returned from outside. Cha Dal told his father about the woman's identity. At first, Ba Wu didn't believe him, but then he thought back, and when he was carrying her, a woman ran after them calling her Your Highness. He hadn't paid any attention to it at the time. Now that it dawned on him, he was instantly terrified and sat down hard on the ground. Princess Su Kyung also recognized that the person who kidnapped her was the man who had been fighting in front of the temple the other day. At her husband's house, everyone discovered that their daughter-in-law was missing and mistakenly believed that enemies had come to their house. Princess Su Kyung's father-in-law was a high-ranking official in the court, the left state councillor, Aicheom. You could say he was second only to the king. To have risen to that position, he must have been extremely ruthless. His victims of destroying families were beyond one. For his daughter-in-law to be kidnapped in broad daylight would damage the family's reputation. No matter what, they had to find her, but they couldn't search openly, especially if the king found out, because his position would definitely be jeopardized. What he feared most was what happened. The king suddenly felt nostalgic for Princess Su Kyung, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. A few days ago was the anniversary of her husband's death. She became a widow in the counselor's house, so he felt a little remorseful and wanted to use the occasion to see Princess Su Kyung. Aicheom had to find Princess Su Kyung within a day. After learning the princess's identity, Ba Wu went to find Chun Bi to discuss their options. Cha Dal helped untie Princess Su Kyung and even cooked a meal for her. Seeing the young boy in front of her cooking and sewing so well, the kind-hearted Princess Su Kyung was touched. Cha Dal also seemed to adore her. She asked if she could stay and not go back. Don't let my father's temper fool you, he's actually very kind. He's not at all interested in beautiful women. It's all because of his boy's mother. Before she could finish speaking, Ba Wu, who had come up with a plan, pushed the door open and stopped Cha Dal. Seeing the fierce-looking man in front of her, Princess Su Kyung instinctively put her arm around Cha Dal protectively. Ba Wu wanted to bring Su Kyung back home, so he asked the princess if she would send people to capture them if he took her back. Princess Su Kyung guaranteed absolutely that this wouldn't happen. So, under the cover of darkness, the father and son secretly carried Princess Su Kyung back to her residence. But he discovered that the normally quiet road was unexpectedly brightly lit with fires. Ba Wu eavesdropped and learned that Princess Su Kyung's in-laws, in an attempt to conceal the truth, had falsely told the king that Princess Su Kyung had committed suicide. This man had mistakenly believed the princess was the widow he helped change her fate, and he had kidnapped her and brought her back to his house. Now he wanted to return her, but he couldn't. But keeping her in his home was unsustainable. Killing her felt too regrettable. He thought and thought, but couldn't come up with a solution, and the only option left was to sell the girl to someone else. He found a troupe of performers and sold her for 3 silver nyang. He told the troupe leader that the woman was crazy and not to listen to her nonsensical ramblings, and absolutely not to believe her if she claimed to be a princess. The troupe leader gave Ba Wu the money. Just then, Cha Dal ran up, hitting his father's hand and knocking the 3 silver nyang to the ground, and standing protectively in front of her, he shouted, "You can't sell my mother." The troop leader, upon seeing this, felt that the man before him was cruel, selling even his own wife. Ba Wu picked up Cha Dal, not caring how heartbroken Su Kyung was behind him, and left without looking back. The troop leader saw that she was a great beauty, and it would be a waste to sell her to a brothel. He might as well enjoy her himself first. Su Kyung was filled with hatred and fear, but her hands and feet were tightly bound, and she couldn't cry out for help. She was now like a chicken on a platter, ready to be slaughtered. As the lecherous troop leader was about to carry out his plan, Ba Wu, now filled with regret, returned. The troop leader, seeing that this cheapskate was trying to get back something he already sold, picked up a weapon and swung at Ba Wu, but Ba Wu returned the blow with a punch. Ba Wu hurriedly helped untie Su Kyung's hands. Su Kyung, once her hands were free, without a word, slapped Ba Wu hard across the face, scolding him for being worse than an animal. Ba Wu didn't resist the blow. After all, he had done wrong and deserved to be hit. He apologized to the princess and then decided to take the princess back to the palace to find her father, the king. Her in-laws, wanting to protect their family's reputation, had falsely told the world that Princess Su Kyung had committed suicide to preserve her chastity for her husband. But the queen knew her daughter better than anyone and absolutely refused to believe it. Given Su Kyung's optimistic nature, she would never commit suicide. So she demanded that her in-laws open the coffin to verify. But opening the coffin would expose the lie. Lord Aicheom said that the princess's state of death was not peaceful, worried that the queen would be deeply traumatized upon seeing it. The queen was furious and insisted on seeing her. But Aicheom, from beginning to end, found all sorts of reasons to stop her. The queen, in pain and anger, finally fell unconscious. Not only did the queen not believe that Su Kyung had suddenly committed suicide, but even her brother-in-law, Deob, didn't believe it. Deob and Su Kyung had known each other since childhood and could be considered childhood sweethearts. However, his father had requested the emperor to marry Su Kyung to his second older brother. Su Kyung became his second brother's wife, and his feelings of love for her had to be secretly buried deep in his heart. He knew Su Kyung's personality very well and didn't believe that she would commit suicide. Deob was resting in a tea house while on the way to handle some business outside when he encountered a royal guard delivering a letter. His subordinate bribed the guard. He learned the news of his second brother's wife's passing. But even if he were beaten to death, he wouldn't believe it. Deob had to see what had actually happened. He wanted to perform an inquest to verify. His older brother tried to stop him, but couldn't. Eventually, he was thoroughly scolded by his father, Lord Aicheom. Suddenly, he remembered Du, the wet nurse who was also a palace maid and always by Su Kyung's side. So, his older brother went with him to find Palace Maid Du and get to the bottom of things. The lives of all of Palace Maid Du's family members, from top to bottom, had been taken hostage by Aicheom. With no other choice, she had to lie. Weeping, she said that it was because she hadn't taken good care of the princess, and begged to be given death. Seeing that Palace Maid Du wasn't speaking nonsense, his older brother offered a few words of comfort before leaving. Once Palace Maid Du looked around and saw that no one else was there, she called Deob over and told him the truth: the princess had been kidnapped. Ba Wu and his son planned to escort the princess back to the royal palace. As soon as they left the gate, they were encountered by several people dressed in black. Chun Bi had been captured and was now leading these people. Ba Wu saw this and, realizing the danger, Su Kyung and his son immediately ran. Aicheom, fearing that his lies would be exposed, sent people to eliminate his daughter-in-law. After his subordinates investigated and found out that the daughter-in-law had been kidnapped after being bound and gagged, they quickly captured Ba Wu's best friend, Chun Bi. Although Chun Bi was a good-for-nothing, he was a loyal friend. Unable to fight against so many alone, he led them on a wild goose chase, but the sharp-eyed guard still managed to spot the princess. Ba Wu led the princess and his son in a desperate escape. The three of them then hid inside a thatched roof house and overheard the assassins outside saying that once they captured the princess, they would immediately eliminate her. It was then that Su Kyung learned that her father-in-law had sent people to kill her. At that moment, one of the assassins lifted the flap covering the door of the thatched roof house, and the three of them were about to be exposed. But just at that moment, Deob flew down from above, kicking one end of a handcart. The other end of the handcart catapulted the assassin, sending him sprawling to the ground. Su Kyung was very surprised to see that Deob had arrived, but considered it a stroke of luck that someone had come to save her. The assassins, hearing the commotion, hurried over. Ba Wu, seeing someone coming to Su Kyung's rescue, knew these assassins were sent by Lord Aicheom. Since they probably wouldn't kill the Lord's daughter, he took Cha Dal's hand and left. But no matter how they tried to escape, assassins surrounded and pursued them. Turning around, Su Kyung tripped and fell, while Deob was single-handedly outnumbered. Ba Wu told Cha Dal to run ahead, and he and Di Yob joined forces to fight off the assassins. Then, he persuaded Su Kyung to flee first, saying the assassins only wanted her life and wouldn't harm Di Yob. Su Kyung thought it made sense, so she fled with Ba Wu. During the escape, a thorn pierced Su Kyung's foot, causing a lot of bleeding. Cha Dal was heartbroken to see this. Just as he was about to help Su Kyung bandage the wound, his father pushed him away. Ba Wu, being a rough man, didn't care about propriety. He moved quickly to take off Su Kyung's sock. Su Kyung wouldn't let him be so crude and kicked him away. Ba Wu, angered, roared at Su Kyung, asking if she was still concerned about the separation of the sexes at a time like this. He demanded that Su Kyung give him her foot. Su Kyung then realized Ba Wu simply wanted to help bandage her wound, so she gave him her foot. After Ba Wu simply treated the wound on the bottom of Su Kyung's foot, Cha Dal reminded him that he should buy Su Kyung a pair of shoes. Ba Wu, looking at her torn shoes, agreed that they were unwearable. So he went out to the market to buy shoes. After much browsing, he finally spotted a pair of red shoes, but upon asking the price, they were incredibly expensive. The shoe merchant said the shoes were made for a princess's wedding, but the princess became a widow before her wedding, so she couldn't wear the red shoes. Ba Wu, looking at them, felt they were just right. Expensive or not, he asked the owner if he could throw in a pair of socks as well. After putting on the new socks and shoes, Su Kyung prepared to go to the palace to see her father. But to her dismay, Aichiam's men were everywhere. If Su Kyung were discovered, she would be killed immediately. She couldn't even get near the city gate, let alone the palace gate. Then they went near the river where the palace maids were washing clothes. Cha Dal playfully threw stones into the water, causing splashes and successfully infuriating one of the maids. She chased after Cha Dal, intending to hit him. Ba Wu seized the opportunity to steal the maid's washbasin. Su Kyung dressed up to look like a palace maid and lined up to enter the palace. But unexpectedly, a Han Pu was required. It was almost her turn. She didn't know what to do and froze on the spot. Suddenly, Cha Dal ran up and gave her a Han Pu. It turned out Cha Dal had stolen it from another palace maid to give to her. Su Kyung gave the Han Pu to the guard and successfully passed through the gate. This woman is formidable. Even the palace concubines of His Highness must offer her valuable gifts as bribes. If she's not pleased, she leaves immediately. The crafty old schemer, Aichiam, seeks her counsel to discern the emperor's intentions. Even His Highness consults with her on matters of state. She is Lady Sangguan Kim, bold yet cautious and cunning. Princess Su Kyung barely managed to enter the palace, but she couldn't see her mother. Her mother, believing she was dead, suffered a severe shock and fell ill, unable to rise from her bed. The entrance to her mother's chambers was guarded, preventing her from entering. She then took her hairpin and gave it to a young maid, asking her to deliver it to Lady Sangguan Han in her mother's chambers. Lady Sangguan Han, upon seeing the hairpin, would undoubtedly recognize it as a sign and come to meet her. However, at the appointed time and place, it wasn't Lady Sangguan Han who arrived. The young maid turned out to be a sycophant who, in a flash, handed the hairpin over to Lady Sangguan Kim. In an instant, Su Kyung realized that her mother still didn't know she was alive. Su Kyung couldn't be sure if this Lady Sangguan Kim was loyal to her father the emperor or to the Grand Tutor, Aichiam. But Lady Sangguan Kim's words pierced her heart like a knife. Sangguan Kim said, "Neither Grand Tutor Aichiam nor His Highness wants you to be alive. If you are alive, Aichiam will be seen as deceiving the emperor, and His Highness will be guilty of deceiving the monarch and plotting against the princess. This is the same as treason, punishable by the execution of your entire family. But he is not someone who would easily provoke, and will not sit still to bear restraint. He controls 80% of the court. Killing him would just force him to rebel." Lady Sangguan Kim whispered in Su Kyung's ear, "Vanish from this world, and everything will be peaceful." Just as she finished speaking, His Highness's voice echoed from nearby. The emperor, unable to sleep, had come to the back garden for a stroll. As he passed by, he saw Sangguan Kim whispering with a young woman and asked who she was with. Su Kyung quickly lowered her head. Sangguan Kim said it was a laundry maid. The emperor ordered the maid to raise her head. Su Kyung slowly lifted her face. The emperor saw Su Kyung's face but pretended not to recognize her, told Sangwon Kim to follow him, and left without another word. Su Kyung stood frozen, suddenly understanding everything. Her father knew that Grand Tutor Aicheom had deceived him, but he had chosen to abandon her. Tears welled up and streamed down her face. The emperor abandons his daughter. Even if he abandoned her, he still has to use Su Kyung one more time. He asked the guards around him to look for Su Kyung and secretly monitor the movements of Aicheom and seize evidence of the murder of the princess. His Highness knew that Aicheom was mobilizing his own forces, waiting for the day of the uprising, and he pressured him to kill his mother. His Highness wants to use Su Kyung's death to put pressure on Aicheom's power. Su Kyung, despondent, led Cha Dal out of the palace. The palace was no longer a place where she could find refuge. Her father was no longer someone who could protect her. When he married her off to Grand Tutor Aicheom's second son, she became a widow before even entering his household. Her father had abandoned her once before. Now, he was abandoning her again. She despairingly wanted to leave the capital, but Grand Tutor Aicheom was determined to kill her at all costs. All the palace gates were heavily guarded. Ba Wu, dressed in mourning clothes, acted suspiciously to draw the guards' attention. Su Kyung seized the opportunity to slip out of the city gate with Cha Dal. Following Ba Wu and Cha Dal, she walked aimlessly, not knowing where to go. Cha Dal, innocent as he was, naively thought the three of them could now live a happy life together. But Ba Wu wanted to part ways with the princess right then and there. Cha Dal really didn't understand what his father was thinking. Although Su Kyung was reluctant to leave, Cha Dal wasn't her biological child. She was just a girl abandoned by the whole world. Besides the mourning clothes she wore, all she had left was a pair of red shoes. She had nothing left, and therefore nothing left to hold on to. A princess of noble birth had, overnight, become a commoner with nothing to her name, hunted by her husband's family. Even her own royal father didn't hope for her survival, so she decided to throw herself into the abyss. Cha Dal cried and demanded the princess, begging his father to let her live with them, wanting the princess to be his mother. He then recounted to his father the incident of meeting the princess in the palace, but the king wouldn't acknowledge his daughter. Hearing this, Ba Wu's conscience couldn't bear it. He told Cha Dal to stay put, and he ran back to find Su Kyung. Reaching the cliff's edge, he saw the mourning clothes and the red shoes neatly arranged on the brink. He panicked, crawled to the edge, and saw Su Kyung, looking like a white lotus, slowly disappearing beneath the frigid water. Without a second thought, Ba Wu immediately jumped into the water, rescuing Su Kyung and bringing her ashore. Cha Dal ran crying, telling the princess not to die. Su Kyung looked at the boy before her, someone unrelated to her, yet in just a few short days had developed such deep affection for her. In that moment, she felt content and regained hope for life. Not caring about her husband's family or the king, she resolved to live the rest of her days for herself. It was just that Cha Dal couldn't keep calling her Your Highness. Cha Dal said, "How about calling you Mom?" Ba Wu turned red, quickly stopping him. If she were called Mom, then, in name, the princess would be Cha Dal's mother. He was afraid Su Kyung wouldn't agree, and he would lose face, so he told Cha Dal not to say such things. Su Kyung, however, told Cha Dal that he could call her Mom. Ba Wu's heart blossomed. However, on the surface, he feigned reluctance. The family of three then went to a small village and bought a small, old house. The father and son began to clean it up, seeing them working so diligently, while she couldn't help at all. Ba Wu's savings were almost depleted, and the princess, except for the mourning clothes she wore, had nothing. Therefore, he had to go out and earn money. But this rural village couldn't compare to the county town. Everyone was poor, and there was no money to hire people. Ba Wu went to several households but couldn't earn any money. As a result, he went to the gambling den. Originally, he planned to win a little money, but he ended up losing all of his remaining funds. However, it wasn't without some gain. He learned that the reason everyone was so poor was because they were exploited by the village's landlord. He returned home and saw his son and Su Kyung, each holding a radish in their hands and eating it. He found out that there was no rice left in the house. As soon as he said that, Su Kyung nonchalantly farted. The three of them looked at each other, speechless. Su Kyung was very embarrassed. If she had said something else at that moment, perhaps nothing would have happened. Soo Kyung stood up and went outside. The son looked at his father and felt that his father was beyond help. He asked him what they would do tomorrow, what they would eat, as they couldn't just keep eating radishes. Ba Wu told him to rest assured. He decided he would pull off a big job tonight. The son had no idea that what his father called the big job was actually climbing over the wall of the village's wealthy landlord's house. He had barely climbed over, ready to sneak inside, when Cha Dal came running up. Ba Wu, seeing him, quickly told his son to leave. Cha Dal wanted to keep watch outside for his father. With no other choice, Ba Wu had to act fast. He stealthily slipped into the landlord's house. Seeing the landlord and his wife fast asleep, he crept over to the vanity table, opening each small drawer and box. Inside were all kinds of gold and silver jewelry. No wonder the people were so resentful. Just as he was leaving, the family caught him. He quickly scrambled back over the wall, grabbed Cha Dal's hand, and they fled for their lives, only to run into Soo Kyung. Though she was furious, she knew she had to be reasonable and protect the innocent. Cha Dal was too young to be seen stealing and be taken away. She said to Ba Wu, "Do you want your son to become a thief later in life?" Ba Wu retorted, "Do you want him to starve to death?" The argument escalated. Finally, Ba Wu, without any restraint, told Soo Kyung to go die. Soo Kyung, enraged, opened the door and left. The son cried and begged his father to apologize to Soo Kyung. By this time, Ba Wu had calmed down. He stepped outside, but she was gone. The red shoes he had given Soo Kyung were left under the eaves of the house. Ba Wu was panic-stricken. It was all his stupid mouth's fault. The father and son searched everywhere in the deep woods, but couldn't find Soo Kyung. By evening, the son was exhausted and fell asleep hugging the red shoes. Alone, Ba Wu took a lantern and continued the search. Finally, he saw Soo Kyung, dressed in old, worn-out clothes, returning home. Ba Wu was overjoyed to see Soo Kyung back, but he stubbornly maintained a tough exterior and criticized Soo Kyung, saying she had left for a whole day without a word to them, and his son was worried sick and hadn't even eaten. As soon as Soo Kyung heard that Cha Dal hadn't eaten, she ignored Ba Wu and went straight inside to find Cha Dal. Because Soo Kyung's morning dress was too conspicuous, she had exchanged it for a set of commoner's clothes and received 3 silver coins in addition. Previously, when Ba Wu sold Soo Kyung to the troop, he only got 3 silver coins, but her morning dress alone was worth that much. Afterwards, Soo Kyung was afraid of being recognized by the soldiers of Minister Aicheom, so she deliberately dirtied her face and washed dishes in a restaurant, earning some money. The father and son were utterly astonished upon hearing this. Washing dishes is such a disgrace. Are we so poor that we can't eat or drink, that stealing from other people is somehow respectable? Soo Kyung declared with confidence, "I'll go out and earn money later. Money has to be earned through hard work to have any meaning. Wealth comes from accumulating little by little." But the next day, she had a new realization. While washing clothes by the riverbank, she overheard a conversation between the neighborhood housewives. They were laughing and talking happily. Listening carefully, she learned that the cruel landlord's house had been robbed, and a young fellow had stolen all of his gold, silver, and jewelry. The landlord's wife was sitting in front of her house crying. The housewives seemed overjoyed and even said they should thank the thief, who had robbed the right person, and help them vent their anger. Soo Kyung was perplexed for a moment. This world was truly crazy. Were the common people cheering for and applauding a bandit? In the following days, everyone minded their own business. Soo Kyung relied on washing dishes to earn a little money, gradually helping a bit with the living expenses. Ba Wu also went up the mountain to try to gather firewood and earn money. Their small family slowly improved. The 3 of them lived simple days, peaceful though humble, but their peaceful life was destined to be very short-lived and quickly shattered. His Majesty wanted to revise the tax system to collect grain instead of money. Grand Scholar Aicheom summoned several officials to oppose it, worrying that the grain would spoil during transport over long distances. His Majesty exposed the truth, that if the tax was changed to grain, the landlords and contractors responsible for paying tribute would not be able to embezzle from within. Grand Scholar Aicheom did not deny it, saying, "The new palace that your Majesty is building, the silver used for it all comes from the money from the landlords and tribute contractors." Or perhaps your majesty should stop building the new palace. His Majesty building a new palace was to stabilize the position of his lineage, so stopping construction was absolutely out of the question. Aicheom then said, if compared, the people would of course hope that your majesty would not build a palace rather than hope to change the tax from money to grain. Grand Scholar Aicheom then checkmated King Gwanghiguan, leaving him speechless. Afterward, King Gwanghiguan dismissed Grand Scholar Aicheom and summoned a royal guard. His Majesty asked the guard if Su Kyung's whereabouts had been found. The guard said they had been found, but Aicheom still didn't know. His Majesty ordered the guard to reveal Su Kyung's hiding place to Grand Scholar Aicheom. The princess's childhood friend and sister-in-law immediately ran to her upon learning of Su Kyung's whereabouts and want to take her away. Su Kyung worried about implicating him, so she refused. After obtaining the information, Grand Scholar Aicheom sent his private soldiers to take Su Kyung's life. Ba Wu and Di Yob protected Su Kyung, so they fought with the soldiers. But because the enemy was too numerous, Di Yob was injured. Ba Wu, unarmed, was about to be killed. The royal guard stood by the side, secretly waiting for the princess to be killed and had no intention of helping. Coincidentally, at this moment, Su Kyung, from who knows where, took out a bow and arrow, shooting and killing an assassin, rescuing Ba Wu. She and Ba Wu took Di Yob back to their place to treat his wounds. The wound was too serious, and the doctor said that he needed Korean ginseng to heal. Korean ginseng was very expensive, and their family only had 4 bare walls. They could barely survive, so how could they afford to buy Korean ginseng? Seeing Di Yob's health getting weaker and weaker, Su Kyung said that they had to buy it and turned her eyes toward Ba Wu. With no other choice, Ba Wu had to give his remaining silver to the doctor. Having stayed by Su Kyung's side for a while, Ba Wu gradually found his way to the straight and narrow. Su Kyung, on the other hand, being around Ba Wu, learned a few tricks of the shady kind. Together, they arrived at the doorstep of the most notorious scoundrel in the district. Su Kyung was seething with such hatred that she clenched her teeth. Ba Wu suggested, how about we just climb over the wall and steal from them? But Su Kyung retorted, that won't do. What good is mere theft? Ba Wu glanced at the woman, realizing that when she was enraged, there was no reasoning with her. The two of them had to act, and they needed a rather specific approach. Having grown up in the palace, Su Kyung possessed a broad understanding. She forged some royal tokens, disguised herself as a man, and, riding a horse, she and Ba Wu approached the family's gate. A concubine of the head of the household came out to greet them. Though wealthy, they were as blind as bats, having never actually encountered a high-ranking official. Hearing that they were from the royal palace, and seeing the convincingly forged tokens, they immediately believed them, attending to their every need with utmost respect, wining and dining them. The concubine, who had forced the man's first wife out, was currently worried about her son's prospects. They were rich, but they lacked connections in high places, so they were eager to secure a government position for him. Su Kyung and Ba Wu, playing off each other seamlessly, eventually managed to extract a considerable sum of money. They not only bought Korean ginseng, but also used the remaining funds to provide aid to the impoverished commoners who couldn't afford medical care at the clinic. Meanwhile, His Highness was increasingly anxious and fretful. The soldiers under the command of Minister Aicheom were proving to be unbelievably incompetent. They couldn't even kill a single woman. Without the princess's death, there was no proof, and without proof, there was no way to incriminate Minister Aicheom. Seeing Minister Aicheom growing ever more arrogant and his power eclipsing his own, His Highness felt compelled to lend him a hand. He requested Minister Kim to find a trustworthy individual, someone who was opposed to Minister Aicheom. The next day, during the royal court assembly, His Highness announced that he had dreamt of Princess Su Kyung. The dream interpreter declared that it was because the princess's burial site was inauspicious and needed to be moved. The individual whom His Highness had approached quickly seconded the motion, claiming that he had indeed sent people to inspect the princess's grave and that it was considered extremely unlucky, threatening the stability of the nation, and needed to be relocated immediately. Upon hearing this, all the court officials immediately knelt and implored His Highness to order the immediate relocation of the tomb. Minister Aicheom had no choice but to agree. However, he had to kill the princess before the relocation could take place. Otherwise, the empty coffin would surely be discovered. On the other side, Diyob was gradually recovering thanks to Korean ginseng. He asked Ba Wu to help him steal an item. This item was currently hidden in a small cabinet in his father's room. This item could not only absolve his father of treason charges, but also help Su Kyung re-enter the palace. Upon hearing this, Ba Wu was furious. "What do you take me for? You're not only asking me to steal, but you want me to break into your own house to do it." Diyob traded on Ba Wu's good friend, Chun Bi, as leverage. Chun Bi protected Ba Wu while he fled, but was then imprisoned in the woodshed by Lord Aicheom. Diyob took responsibility for rescuing Chun Bi, while Ba Wu would take responsibility for the theft. Once that was done, the cooperation from the inside and outside would be sure to be very successful. After thinking it over, Ba Wu agreed, planning to take action under the cover of darkness. But unexpectedly, this trip led him to uncover a shocking secret. As night fell, Diyob held a torch and set fire to the dry straw in his house. He shouted loudly, "Fire! Fire!" Everyone rushed outside, some trying to put out the fire, others trying to escape to save their lives, creating complete chaos. Ba Wu used the confusion to climb over the wall and sneak into Lord Aicheom's room. Diyob told him that what he needed was in the cabinet to the left of the reading table. He found the cabinet, bent down, and opened it. Inside was an intricately carved box. Opening it, he found a royal pardon. This pardon was secretly granted to Lord Aicheom by the Crown Prince to reward him for his contributions when the prince was in dire straits. It could be said that this was Lord Aicheom's second life. He took the pardon and put the empty box back in its place. Hearing a noise, Ba Wu hid behind a screen. Lord Aicheom entered the room and went straight to the cabinet, taking out letters and the box containing the pardon. The space behind the screen was cramped, and smoke from outside was seeping into the room. Unable to suppress it any longer, Ba Wu coughed, just as Lord Aicheom heard it. Diyob hurriedly ran into the room, coughing and choking as he did so. Lord Aicheom lowered his guard. Diyob used the chaos to release Chun Bi and court Lady Zhou, then turned back to guide Lord Aicheom out of the room. This allowed Ba Wu to escape disaster, sneaking out and hiding in the woodshed to meet Diyob again. Unexpectedly, Lord Aicheom passed by at that moment. They had to quickly duck down. Lord Aicheom asked his eldest son if he had seen his mother. As soon as Ba Wu heard the voice, he recognized it. He looked up and his eyes widened in disbelief. Lord Aicheom was none other than the enemy who had murdered his father. He had not only killed his father, but also his grandfather and 2 uncles. If he hadn't managed to escape then, he wouldn't be alive today. He remembered everything, his eyes filled with hatred, his fist clenched, wanting to lunge out. Diyob didn't know why he was suddenly reacting so violently, and had a hard time controlling him. After escaping, he saw Chun Bi and court Lady Zhou. He gave Diyob a strained smile as he returned the royal pardon badge. All this time, he had been waiting for a chance for revenge, never expecting that the person beside him would be the son of the enemy who killed his father. He left without looking back. The next day, Diyob entered the palace to have an audience with His Majesty. He presented the royal pardon badge and revealed that Princess Su Kyung was still alive, along with his father's treasonous acts, pleading with His Majesty to spare his father's life. His Majesty never imagined that such a well-laid plan could be ruined by Diyob. He had intended to use the moving of the tomb as an excuse to punish Grand Scholar Aicheom in front of all the civil and military officials. Even if Grand Scholar Aicheom had killed the princess, he had dispatched guards to collect evidence. At that point, there would have been no way for Grand Scholar Aicheom to escape his death sentence. When Grand Scholar Aicheom produced the royal pardon badge, His Majesty would have accepted his gratitude. This way, His Majesty could have restrained Grand Scholar Aicheom's power, and his daughter wouldn't have sacrificed herself in vain. But, unbelievably, his plan was overturned by Diyob. Ba Wu went to the residence of Grand Scholar Aicheom, a high-ranking official, to steal something. He was ecstatic when he went, but heavy-hearted upon his return. He brought Chun Bi and court Lady Zhou back home. Court Lady Zhou, upon seeing that the princess was safe, was overjoyed and knelt on the ground, sobbing. Just when everyone thought they would live happily together, Ba Wu announced that he had to part ways with the princess right then and there. The princess was surprised but didn't say anything. Cha Dal couldn't accept it and tearfully begged Su Kyung to persuade his father. Chun Bi also didn't understand why Ba Wu was doing this and followed Ba Wu to ask for a clear explanation. The two went to the temple to meet the abbot. It turned out that Ba Wu's real name was Kim Di Siak, the grandson of His Majesty's stepmother. Grand Scholar Ai Cheom, in order to solidify His Majesty's position, had framed the Queen Dowager's father, who was also Ba Wu's grandfather, accusing him of treason. All the male family members were executed. Ba Wu was lucky to escape. Losing his father's protection, Ba Wu wandered the streets and alleys, and the old abbot took care of him. He considered him as a father and changed his name, vowing that one day he would avenge his grandfather, father, and 2 uncles. The old abbot said revenge was possible, but the time wasn't right yet. If he went, he might not be able to get revenge, but his sacrifice was certain. If he dies, what will happen to Cha Dal? Ba Wu thought carefully and realized that the abbot's words made sense. As he was leaving the room, he saw Chun Bi sitting outside. Chun Bi had overheard everything. No wonder he'd always sensed a noble air about Ba Wu. Without indulging in needless chatter, he asked Ba Wu why he had to break up with Princess Su Kyung. If His Highness knew the princess was alive but abandoned her, a king who forsakes his own daughter like that, is it really just because of a pardon that he changed his mind? It was indeed like that. Di Yob had ruined His Highness's plan, but then His Highness told Di Yob, "If you can bring the surviving princess back, I will pardon Ai Cheom." Di Yob, upon hearing this, said he happened to know Su Kyung's whereabouts. In the end, he was still young, so his thinking wasn't truly mature. His Highness would absolutely never let him bring Su Kyung back alive. Following that, His Highness dispatched a group of men to capture Su Kyung and Court Lady Zhou. By the time Di Yob arrived, they had already been taken. This group intended to take Su Kyung to the magistrate's office, and the quickest way was by boat. Ba Wu, coincidentally, was also planning to return to the magistrate's office. After his house had been searched, the house in the county seat was the safest place. From afar, he saw a boat and hurried toward it. At first glance, he saw Su Kyung and Court Lady Zhou sitting on the boat, their hands tied tightly. They made eye contact with each other, without saying a word. Ba Wu felt incredibly conflicted at that moment. Court Lady Zhou hoped Ba Wu would save them and stared intently at him. Ba Wu thought long and hard but ultimately did nothing. And then, after disembarking from the boat, Ba Wu followed behind them, intending to observe where they were being taken, and then rescue them under the cover of darkness. Unexpectedly, Di Yob blocked his path. Ba Wu looked around and didn't see Su Kyung anywhere. He frantically searched everywhere. Di Yob, like a ghost, was haunting him, constantly asking where he had taken Su Kyung. This kid dares to ask where she was taken. If it wasn't for him, how could she have been lost? Su Kyung was taken to the house of Kim Ga-yeon, a trustworthy individual whom His Highness had asked Minister Kim to find. Su Kyung was hiding in this person's house, guarded by soldiers. His Highness had changed his plan, intending to use this tomb relocation to first discover the truth that the coffin did not contain Su Kyung's body. Then, Minister Ai Cheom would undoubtedly find all sorts of reasons and lies to cover it up. At that point, Su Kyung would appear. That way, all the people in Minister Ai Cheom's faction would no longer side with him. Everything in the plan was utterly perfect, but there was one flaw. No matter how carefully His Highness calculated, he couldn't predict that there would still be someone named Ba Wu showing up. Ba Wu trailed the 3 slave hunters who had carried out the kidnapping, intending to wait for the right moment to rescue her, but unexpectedly lost their trail. After turning back, he sought information, inquiring if any slave hunters had recently become rich overnight and frequented brothels. As it turned out, there was indeed such a person. He was a slave hunter in the service of Grand Eunuch Kim, Lord Kim Ya-jeom, the one in charge of observing the stars to predict natural disasters. Lord Kim Ya-jeom and Lord Ai Cheom belonged to opposing factions. A Grand Eunuch who observes the stars, why would he kidnap a princess? Ba Wu thought for a moment, and then guessed it was His Highness. Di Yob, upon hearing this, immediately realized he had fallen into His Highness's trap. It seemed he wasn't a fool after all. After discussing it, the two of them figured out the whole situation. Deob demanded that Ba Wu not interfere in the rescue of his sister-in-law, as he would take responsibility for it. He had once been betrothed to Princess Su Kyung, but overnight she had become his sister-in-law. Hearing this, Ba Wu felt immensely saddened. He didn't know when his feelings for Princess Su Kyung had begun to blossom. However, he knew he was a lone force, without a powerful family like Deob. So, he decided to let Deob handle the rescue, while he would be ready to respond as needed, keeping watch in front of Lord Kim Jajeom's house all night without sleep. Deob returned home. His long absence had enraged his father, who threw an inkstone at Deob. Seeing Deob was injured, Lord Aicheom calmed down somewhat. Deob told Lord Aicheom the truth, that His Highness was hiding the princess. Lord Aicheom didn't believe it. So, Deob had to admit that he had stolen the immunity plaque and had gone to see His Highness, telling his father everything. Lord Aicheom hurriedly went to the cabinet to search for the immunity plaque. He was utterly shocked by what he saw. This son of mine, for his sister-in-law, he actually dared to steal my authority. Lord Aicheom was so angry he nearly choked. But after his eldest son's analysis, he felt something was off. If he obtained the authority, why would His Highness hide the princess? Deob said. His Highness deceived me. Now His Highness is determined to reduce Lord Aicheom's power. Now is not the time to be angry. The first thing to do is find the princess. We must keep her in our hands. Lord Aicheom then stood up, summoning his private soldiers, planning to seize the princess back. By now, everything was ready, but he truly couldn't imagine that His Highness had foreseen that he would lead people to Kim Yajiam's house to take her back. Unexpectedly, His Highness led his own retinue of soldiers and horses directly to Lord Aicheom's house. Lord Aicheom had no choice but to welcome His Highness into his mansion. The two of them exchanged words for a long time. Ba Wu was still waiting for Deob to bring people to rescue Princess Su Kyung, but he had waited for so long. It was almost dark, and he still hadn't arrived. So, he had no choice but to run to Deob's house. As soon as he arrived, he saw many soldiers standing guard in front of the door. He asked and learned that His Highness had arrived. Seeing this, Ba Wu no longer had any hope in Deob and decided to rescue her himself. After all, climbing walls into houses was something he was very used to. He climbed over the wall into the house and saw several slave hunters standing in front of the door of a room. He immediately determined that Princess Su Kyung was inside. At that moment, a piercing scream rang out from inside the room. The slave hunters immediately turned their heads to look inside. Ba Wu seized this opportunity and knocked one of them down. By the time the other two reacted and hastily drew their knives, it was too late. He quickly opened the door and stepped into the room, but unexpectedly, Court Lady Zhou hit him hard on the head with a flower vase, causing him to fall. Then, Princess Su Kyung took out a rope to tie Ba Wu up tightly. A whole entourage of horses and people arrived at the house of Lord Kim Yajiom, saying that someone had reported that a thief had sneaked into Lord Kim Yajiom's residence, so they had come to search for the thief. This reason was truly clumsy. Everyone knew Lord Aicheom's intention. Naturally, Lord Kim Yajiom did not agree. Lord Aicheom then forcibly stormed in. After entering the house, they began to search every room. Deob also ran inside, heading straight to that room. As soon as he entered, he saw broken pieces of pottery all over the floor, and on the table was a set of mourning clothes, and a rope was hanging from the ceiling beam. Had Princess Su Kyung really taken her own life? Deob was extremely stunned. He was one step too late, but he didn't see a body, so he didn't want to believe it. Outside the gate, a group of entertainers was passing by. Su Kyung, Court Lady Zhou, and Ba Wu, even Chun Bi, had joined this group of people after escaping. For the time being, the group stopped at Ba Wu's house in this county town. As for Lord Aicheom, he couldn't find the person and told Lord Kim Yajiom that he apologized for the misunderstanding. Then, he withdrew his troops and left. But he still didn't give up on continuing the search. Ba Wu wanted to play dead for a while, so he told Su Kyung to write a will. He took the will to Lord Kim Yajiom, saying that if he hadn't taken the person away and allowed Lord Aicheom to continue searching, it would have been easy to accuse him of treason, so what he did was saving him. Lord Kim Yajiom couldn't be sure if Ba Wu was Lord Aicheom's man or someone on his side. So, Ba Wu told him his identity. Could he be on the same side as the enemy who killed his father? Grand Minister Kim Ya-jiom brought the posthumous writing to His Royal Highness. His Royal Highness was furious, seeing him as utterly useless. His Royal Highness had invested so much effort and thought into this plan, making a monumental decision, even going so far as to push his only daughter into adversity, and yet he was so incompetent. With the deadline for the tomb relocation fast approaching, if Grand Minister Aicheom couldn't find the princess, the coffin would naturally be empty. The old schemer, Aicheom, knew that His Royal Highness's new palace construction was extremely urgent, so during the court assembly, he used the people's complaints as a pretense to demand that His Royal Highness halt the construction, using this to pressure him. Both men knew perfectly well that as long as His Royal Highness didn't move the tomb, Aicheom wouldn't bother him. However, His Royal Highness firmly refused. For a long time now, building the new palace had been His Royal Highness's dream, and it absolutely could not be stopped, no matter what. Seeing that increasing the pressure on His Royal Highness was ineffective, Grand Minister Aicheom went to see Court Lady Kim. Court Lady Kim had accepted bribes and sold official positions, accumulating a considerable amount of money. He used this to threaten her, forcing her to approach His Royal Highness and speak sweetly, requesting that he stop the tomb relocation. Court Lady Kim was extremely angry, but also helpless. It was her own fault for being dishonest and letting someone get the better of her. So, she went to advise His Royal Highness to sacrifice the small to preserve the large and wait until the new palace was completed before considering further action. Deob still couldn't believe that his sister-in-law would take her own life. Su Kyung advised him, regardless of whether it's true or not, just assume I'm gone. It's better for everyone. The princess can continue to live well. At Ba Wu's house, everyone was packing their belongings, planning to flee that very night. Ba Wu said he'd finished packing and went outside for a walk, just as Deob arrived looking for him. Deob relied on his memory from the last time he came to rescue Su Kyung and found Ba Wu's house. The moment Ba Wu saw him, he became extremely worried and tried to drive Deob away, but he wouldn't leave. Seeing that the two were about to fight, Su Kyung rushed over and stopped them in time. She told Ba Wu to leave first. She wanted a clean break with Deob. She asked Deob to consider her dead, but the past was the past. With that, she took out a small knife and cut a corner off her own sleeve. This action signified that she and Deob were severing all ties, ending their relationship. Deob couldn't accept it, asking her if she was pushing him away because of Ba Wu. Su Kyung didn't deny it, saying that she would be with Ba Wu and Shadal, and they would all live happily together. Deob was heartbroken, but everything was beyond repair, so he left. Ba Wu was sitting in front of the door, his heart aflutter with unease. He was deeply worried that Su Kyung would waver and leave with Deob. Seeing her return eased his heart considerably. But he feigned disinterest, saying, "Now that you're back, let's continue packing." However, Su Kyung declared she would go with Court Lady Zhou and part ways with Ba Wu from there. She even added, "Don't think that just because you saved me, I'm obligated to be grateful," Ba Wu replied. "That's all in the past. Why do you remember it so vividly?" How could Su Kyung ever forget the feeling of despair when he dragged Cha Dal away in front of her? Before she could finish her sentence, Ba Wu reached out and embraced Su Kyung tightly. He didn't want her to continue speaking. Su Kyung didn't finish what she was going to say, but instead told Ba Wu to get away from her. He said, "A momentary lapse in judgment. I apologize." Su Kyung insisted on going with Court Lady Zhou, but Ba Wu didn't want her to. He told Su Kyung that he wouldn't treat her as a princess anymore. She was just a woman he needed to protect. Having said that, he disregarded her protest, saying, "It's cold outside, let's go inside." After returning, he changed their initial plan to depart that night and decided to leave early the next morning. He also held tightly to Su Kyung's luggage. Everyone felt confused, but Su Kyung said nothing. The next day, the group arrived at Chun Bi's hometown. Chun Bi begged his childhood friend to help them rent a house. The men stayed in the shed, while the women slept in the bedroom. The whole family temporarily lived there together like that. After having Su Kyung by his side, Ba Wu began to turn over a new leaf, going to the docks to work as a porter and earn money. Chun-Bi, however, hadn't changed a bit. He still had his eye on Court Lady Jo, wanting to marry her so they could live out their days together. Consequently, he engaged in some shady dealings. Having returned to his hometown, Chun-Bi was determined to make some money. Single for so many years, he also wanted to finally get married. Since his hometown was near the sea, he joined his friend in smuggling ginseng. Smuggling just one ginseng root could increase the price tenfold. This friend had previously approached Ba Wu, but Ba Wu had refused. Chun-Bi's eyes lit up at the sight of money, so he went to the owner of the bookstore, also a childhood friend, and borrowed some money as capital, planning to do just this one deal. But, unbelievably, they encountered a heavy rainstorm that day. Just as the family was sitting together in the room, using bowls and pots to catch the rainwater, the smuggling boat ran into trouble out at sea. Chun-Bi suffered a huge loss, wiping him out completely, and his friend was seriously injured. He returned penniless, and also implicated the bookstore owner. Chun-Bi was left with no other option but to agree to draw erotic paintings, Spring Palace paintings, for the bookstore owner to slowly pay off his debt. He brought home a book to look at while drawing, but he couldn't even hold a brush properly, so how could he possibly draw? He was frustrated all night, wasting a lot of paper but unable to create a single painting. Early in the morning, Su Kyung brought 2 bowls of scorched rice to Cha Dal, but Cha Dal wasn't in the room. Su Kyung directly opened the door and entered the messy room, which looked like a pigsty. She placed the bowls of scorched rice on the table and noticed a book. She was very curious and picked it up to take a look. Then she was shocked by the content inside, instantly throwing the book away. She hurried out, exclaiming, "I need to quickly go wash my eyes." At that moment, Ba Wu and Chun-Bi returned home from outside. Court Lady Jo pinched Chun-Bi's ear and dragged him outside, asking Chun-Bi what was going on. Chun-Bi told Court Lady Jo that the bookstore owner knew Su Kyung was a skilled painter, so he wanted to ask her to paint the pictures, but he was embarrassed to ask himself. And since he couldn't draw well, he had to beg Court Lady Jo to plead with Su Kyung to see if she could help resolve the current crisis. That night, Su Kyung couldn't sleep, so she sat in the garden. She was no longer a princess, but just a poor commoner. If she could pay off Chun-Bi's debt by painting, it wouldn't be so bad. At least she would be earning money with her own hands. The next day, she prepared brushes, ink, and paper, but she couldn't bring herself to start. How could she possibly know how to draw erotic paintings? She didn't even know what her husband looked like before she became a widow. Court Lady Jo told Chun-Bi to bring her a book to reference. Chun-Bi eagerly ran to get one and brought it back. The two of them carefully opened the book. "Oh my, I still can't look at it," she couldn't bear to look, so she threw the book away again. Opening it and throwing it away multiple times, she eventually gave up on painting nude pictures and switched to drawing some romantic love letters between men and women. The bookstore owner looked at them and said, "What the heck is this? Who would want to look at this stuff?" Left with no other choice, she had to redraw them. But no matter how she drew them, the owner didn't approve. Finally, Su Kyung wrote a story to accompany the paintings. Thanks to that, the owner was satisfied. The beautiful paintings combined with the vivid story moved the bookstore owner to tears. From then on, Su Kyung began writing and painting every day. Chun-Bi and maid Jo went to work doing propaganda. Ba Wu worked as a porter. The whole family lived together harmoniously and happily. It's just that Ba Wu unexpectedly discovered something. "I can't believe they're asking the princess to paint these kinds of pictures." The princess, for the sake of making a living, barely earned a little money by writing novels, but it wasn't enough to pay the rent. Writing and painting with her own hands, even if she worked all day to the point of exhaustion, the amount she could produce was limited. Ba Wu initially disagreed, but the princess is a commoner now, she still needs to live. The two had a fight, and Ba Wu eventually agreed. There was nothing else he could help with, so he helped Su Kyung write the text beforehand. The princess only had to add the illustrations, which saved her half the time. The princess was very touched. Half was text, half was pictures. Even people who were illiterate could buy the books and read them. Soon, the news of the picture books spread throughout the city. The bookstore owner even invited a printing house to print more copies. Very quickly, the debts were almost paid off. Life was gradually getting back on track. And then, on the side of Grand Scholar Aichiom, he was extremely anxious. After considering the benefits, His Highness decided to temporarily halt the relocation of the ancestral tombs. But he also couldn't let Grand Scholar Aichiom live in peace. He wanted Grand Scholar Aichiom to shed some blood to appease the spirits of the commoner leaders who had been plotted against solely for the purpose of stabilizing His Highness's position when he was in dire straits. Both men knew very well that His Highness wanted to use Aichiom's money to repay the kindness he had received to help His Highness. However, compared to relocating the tombs, this was a smaller loss. The tomb relocation was considered dropped, no longer mentioned. Aichiom then began to look for Kim Jajiom to settle the score. He had previously offered many suggestions in the matter of relocating the tombs. Aichiom found a reason and searched Kim Jajiom's residence. Grand Scholar Kim Yajiom was extremely angry. He wanted His Highness to give him another chance. So he went to find Senior State Councilor Kim for help, to see if he could redeem himself through merit. Senior State Councilor Kim revealed His Highness's intentions to him. His Highness wanted to obtain even more troops and military provisions from the Kingdom of Joseon after the war with the later Jin. If the Grand Scholar could resolve this matter, then His Highness would definitely look at him in a different light. He then further revealed that Grand Scholar Aichiom had been maintaining close relations with the official Joseon envoys. If His Highness were to speak to Aichiom about this matter, he would owe him yet another favor. After thinking it over, Grand Scholar Kim Jajiom indeed had a way. He handed Grand Scholar Aichiom the letter he had written to the envoys. Aichiom felt it was ridiculous. Why should I help him? Kim Yajiom offered a secret of utmost importance in exchange, promising to tell him after the matter was concluded, guaranteeing that this secret would make Grand Scholar Aichiom unable to resist wanting to know. After thinking it over, Grand Scholar Aichiom felt that Kim Jajiom's meager life was in his hands. If he was deceived, then he would definitely not let Kim Jajiom live well. So he finally agreed. Kim Yajiom revealed to Aichiom the secret that Ba Wu was, in fact, Kim Disiak, and that he was also the one who kidnapped the princess. Upon hearing this, Aichiom was utterly astonished. This was truly a bombshell. If it were just a matter of him being alive, that would be one thing, but he kidnapped the princess. Wasn't this a sign he was back for revenge? So, he went to capture Ba Wu's mother and younger sister, trying to force Ba Wu to reveal himself. Ba Wu's smuggling partner was critically wounded and forced into hiding. Ba Wu sensed something was amiss and questioned his partner about the reason. His partner had almost died, not because of the shipwreck, but because a group of people wanted to silence him permanently. He had been seriously injured and thrown overboard, but managed to survive. He had seen the ship's hold filled with copper and sulfur. This was clearly for making cannons. Moreover, the ship's manager was involved in this scheme. He suspected someone was planning a rebellion. Ba Wu followed Aichiom, intending to kidnap him. But just as he was about to act, he discovered that Aichiom's bodyguard had beaten him to it. The bodyguard asked Aichiom who had escaped from the ship. At this point, Ba Wu understood everything. So, Aichiom was also involved. Well, that was good. Now there might be a way to rescue his mother and sister. The princess, in order to make a living, was earning money by painting, but she inadvertently stirred up trouble. Her new creation, half text, half painting, had attracted countless readers. Even Aichiom's wife had bought it for their household. Soon after, His Majesty promoted Kim Yajiom. Using another person's secret to gain His Majesty's trust, that sly old fox Kim Yajiom is certainly it. After that, he devoted all his efforts to preparing to deal with Aichiom. He struck first at Aichiom's eldest son. A book was circulating outside the palace, the content of which wasn't particularly significant, except that the main characters were a court lady and a member of the royal family. Upon hearing this, the officials were already spreading scandalous stories. Aichiom thought, His Majesty clearly intends to punish me. His Majesty demanded that he find all copies of the book and ordered that the bookseller, the writer, and all the readers be severely punished. Now Aichiom had a problem. The book had been read not only by ordinary people, but also by the wives and concubines of many high-ranking officials. How long would it take to trace the book back to its source? Aichiom gnashed his teeth in anger. Kim Yajiom, having just been promoted, immediately showed off in front of Aichiom and His Majesty. Because of this, he couldn't help but reveal a smug smile. Little did anyone suspect that the book was actually written by the daughter of His Majesty. As soon as Diyob looked at the writing, he didn't recognize who had written it, but he was intimately familiar with the drawings. When he compared them to the artwork the princess had given him, which he kept hidden in his room, they were virtually identical. He then told his boss that he could find the author of the book. If they could find the book's origin, the flow of the book could be traced, and the ban on the book could be lifted smoothly. Although his boss didn't have much faith in Diyob, he could only let him try. A Ming Dynasty envoy arrived for a visit, and Lord Aichiom was in charge of receiving him. Knowing the envoy's preferences, he arranged a feast at a brothel to wash off the dust of the journey, and added some gold, silver, and precious jewels. The envoy, after eating and drinking his fill, and having some money to take back with him, was extremely pleased and prepared to leave. Lord Aichiom handed the envoy a letter asking him to deliver it to the emperor in the mainland. All of this was witnessed by the madam of the brothel. Ba Wu, back when he was a rogue, had a close relationship with the brothel madam. Knowing where the letter was hidden, he planned to steal it. Ba Wu had his smuggling friend distract the envoy, and then, inside the envoy's trunk, he found the letter. It turned out that Lord Aichiom wanted to declare himself king. After reading the letter, Ba Wu pondered for a long time. To save his mother and younger sister, he took the letter late at night to Lord Aichiom's residence, quietly climbed over the wall, and snuck into Lord Aichiom's bedroom, holding a knife to his throat. The Lord woke with a start. Ba Wu pulled down his face covering and announced himself, saying, "Aren't you looking for me everywhere?" He also said he brought a letter with him. Lord Aichiom looked at the letter, wondering how it had gotten into his hands. Without the support of the mainland, he wouldn't be able to break away from the prince. Having no other choice, he agreed to exchange the letter for Ba Wu's mother and sister. The two men agreed on a time and place for the exchange the next day. Ba Wu took the letter. When everything was ready, Diyob suddenly arrived with his men. Upon arriving, he immediately ordered Ba Wu's arrest, falsely accusing him of being the author of the book. Ba Wu firmly believed that Ba Wu, in order to protect Su Kyung, would definitely not reveal anything, and violently resisted. Seeing this, Diyob was heartbroken. The girl who had once been his childhood sweetheart was now shedding tears for a poor commoner. It seemed she had truly changed her heart. A princess, raised in luxury from childhood, had learned to climb walls from a street urchin. Under the cover of darkness, she sneaked into Aichiom's bedroom within his manor. However, stealing, which seemed simple in theory, proved incredibly difficult in practice. The reason for her actions was Ba Wu. He had taken the blame for her and been arrested. It was time for the exchange of letters, but Lord Aichiom didn't know that Ba Wu was the one who had been arrested for drawing the forbidden books. Not seeing Ba Wu arrive, Lord Aichiom did not know what he was planning. Concerned, he backstabbed him and handed the letter over to His Highness. Aichiom reasoned that if the crown had the letter and know his plan to rebel, there was no way His Highness would remain silent. Lord Aichiom was uncertain. So, Diyob suggested a plan to Lord Aichiom. Since His Highness has instructed the Crown Prince to find the source of the forbidden books, give him a fake list. Erase the names of everyone on our side and only include those from the opposing faction. If His Highness wants to protect the opposing faction, he will take the incriminating letter from Lord Aichiom. If the letter isn't in his possession, he'll have to abandon the opposing faction. This will not only reveal whether His Highness has the letter, but also inflict heavy losses on Kim Jajium's faction. This idea was truly excellent. First, they sought out the bookstore owner and instructed him to create another list. Afterward, they planned to kill the bookseller to silence him. His Highness's initial joy didn't last long. After the list was presented, he felt a headache coming on. It was filled with the names of his supporters. He decided to personally interrogate the criminals. So, His Highness doesn't know of Lord Aichiom's plans to rebel. If that wasn't the case, he wouldn't be in such discomfort. All he has to do is use the letter to force Lord Aichiom to reveal his true colors. As for Lord Aichiom, he felt extremely confident. However, he didn't expect that the person His Highness intended to interrogate was Ba Wu. Distrusting his own faction, His Highness dispatched his personal guards to silence the criminals under the cover of darkness. Chun Bi learned of this. This Lord Aicheom is truly audacious. The princess thought for a long time before deciding that she must get her hands on the real list. So, as night fell, she sneaked into Lord Aicheom's manor and made her way to his room. He, however, was dead drunk. Soo Kyung searched through the small cabinets but didn't pay attention to her feet. She accidentally kicked a wine bottle. Aicheom stirred. Soo Kyung carefully continued her search. Overcome with tension, she panicked and grabbed a flower vase, smashing it over Aicheom's head. Then, she took off running. Struck on the head, Aicheom sobered up instantly and gave chase, yelling, "Catch the assassin!" Soo Kyung was surrounded on all sides by Aicheom's private soldiers. Just as she was about to be captured, a person dressed in black leaped down from above, rescuing Soo Kyung. Taking advantage of the opportunity, she escaped. "This is great. I couldn't get the list, and nearly lost my life as well." After returning, everyone was extremely disappointed. Cha Dol was waiting for the adults to come back, and he said that someone had delivered a very strange book to the house. Everyone hurriedly rushed inside to check, and they were all surprised to find that it was exactly what they had been looking for. The princess had concealed her true identity, calling herself a commoner, but she unexpectedly encountered a mean person and was criticized and bullied by Ba Wu's mother. She was forced to wash clothes and cook meals, and she wasn't even given good food, all because they thought she was a commoner. So, the grandson's status couldn't possibly become noble. That woman didn't know that the princess was their true benefactor. Without her, not only would they not be able to restore their status, but even Ba Wu might have died in prison. He was imprisoned, but somehow, against all odds, he managed to restore his identity. This was completely unexpected by Lord Aicheom. The princess obtained a list because Diyob had secretly stolen it for her. Diyob knew very well that the origins of the picture book would eventually be investigated by his superior. If that happened, the information that Soo Kyung was still alive would be exposed. So, he requested that his superior assign him the task of finding the source of the picture book. Then he had Ba Wu imprisoned to prevent him from making any deals with Lord Aicheom. Otherwise, Ba Wu and his entire family would be killed by Lord Aicheom's subordinates. During the negotiation, Lord Aicheom had already set a trap. If Ba Wu appeared, he would certainly die. Diyob brought him to the prison and persuaded Ba Wu to hand over the letter so that he could give it to Lord Aicheom. Then he would secretly release Ba Wu's family. The blame for the picture book would be placed on the bookstore owner, and Ba Wu would escape. If it had only been like that, the matter would have been as perfect as he imagined. However, Ba Wu would rather die than hand over the letter. Lord Aicheom couldn't wait any longer, worried that the letter would fall into the hands of His Highness. If he couldn't contain himself, he would immediately start a rebellion. So, he came up with a plan to create a fake list to appease his own father. And that day, His Highness sent his personal guard to kill the criminals and silence them. But Diyob happened to witness it. He returned and analyzed. His Highness wants to silence them to protect Kim Jajium's faction. Then, he gave the real list to Soo Kyung so that she could go and save Ba Wu. All of this was planned by Diyob, who had considered every possible angle, but the reality didn't unfold as smoothly as he had thought. Soo Kyung got the list and had to rush it to Kim Ya-jiom's house, handing over the real list and pleading with him to restore Ba Wu's status no matter what. The next morning, Kim Ya-jiom gave the list to His Highness and also told him the secret that the criminal imprisoned in the jail was Kim D-seok. His Highness was very surprised. Whether this could put pressure on Aicheom remained to be seen based on the outcome of the interrogation tomorrow. Aicheom couldn't have imagined that when the criminal's hood was removed, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. When asked how many lists there were, Ba Wu said there were 2. The eldest son then began to panic, saying that Ba Wu was lying and suggesting that he be tortured. At this moment, Kim Ya-jiom produced another list. When the handwriting was compared, it matched perfectly. Originally, the eldest son was sure of victory, but as soon as he saw the list, he couldn't argue. Opening the list, it was recorded very clearly that not only had Kim Ya-jiom's faction been bribed, but even members of Lord Aicheom's faction had also been bought. Ba Wu was brought back to the royal residence by His Highness. After confirming that Ba Wu was indeed Kim D-seok, His Highness asked Ba Wu if he would agree to become his right-hand man. Ba Wu, in fact, had been thinking along the same lines. Only by reclaiming his identity could he righteously avenge his family. His Highness bestowed upon him a grand house. When he learned that the princess was still alive, His Highness was overjoyed. Ba Wu's sharp-tongued mother also transformed from a mere servant into the lady of the house. However, she looked down upon her daughter-in-law, who identified herself as someone without a place to call home. No matter how diligently she served tea, fetched water, washed clothes, and cooked meals each day, she couldn't accept her daughter-in-law's lowly status. She had completely forgotten her own powerlessness when she was a servant. She wanted to dissolve the marriage so her son could marry someone else, but Ba Wu sternly refused. The extended contact had caused him to truly fall in love with Su Qiong. Su Qiong hadn't even agreed to become his legitimate wife, and yet his mother was already ruining everything. Regarding the case of the forged roster, Aiqiom had unexpectedly found a scapegoat, killing his subordinate and staging the scene to look like the man had taken his own life out of fear of punishment. Aiqiom was demoted one rank, but he still desperately pleaded for his son. His Highness turned a blind eye, which was essentially for Ba Wu's sake. The wife of Lord Aiqiom was also on the list of those who had purchased forbidden books. He didn't disclose this in order to save face for Lord Aiqiom. Subsequently, to appease the public, His Highness decided to issue a general amnesty to calm everyone's anxieties and also officially restored Ba Wu's identity. Lord Aiqiom, knowing he couldn't win the argument, had no choice but to allow Ba Wu to reclaim his identity, planning to find a way to deal with him later. Ba Wu passed the military officer examination and became a valuable asset to His Highness. Now, he not only had to avenge his family, but also had to protect Su Qiong well. He had to be vigilant and careful. Su Qiong used her status as Cha Dal's mother to enter the capital and reside in Ba Wu's house. After learning that the princess was still alive, His Highness secretly met with her once. He wanted to protect his daughter under the guise of a father. His Highness dispatched soldiers to guard Ba Wu's house. Not even a fly could get in. The palace maid Zhou was in charge of the family's meals, and Chun Bi was responsible for chores. Lord Aiqiom sent a slave to the house to monitor them, but was refused entry. The secrecy only fueled Lord Aiqiom's curiosity. He always wanted to know what secrets were hidden inside. And this was exactly what His Highness wanted. He appeared to want to protect the princess, but in reality, he wanted to use her as bait, to push Lord Aiqiom to the point where he couldn't suppress his curiosity and made a mistake. He also exploited Di Yob's feelings for Su Qiong, requesting Di Yob to monitor Lord Aiqiom's every move. He believed that if Lord Aiqiom made any moves, Di Yob would immediately notify him. Di Yob, desperate to save Su Qiong, relentlessly devised ingenious plans. Although he managed to prevent his father's rebellion and safeguard the lives of Su Qiong and Ba Wu, his family still suffered significant losses. His elder brother's demotion infuriated Grand Master Aiqiom, who refused to listen to Di Yob's explanations and prepared to subject him to family discipline. His aunt threatened Grand Master Aiqiom, demanding, "Must I reveal things that shouldn't be spoken before you'll spare Di Yob?" Di Yob didn't understand what was happening, but he was certain that his family held secrets that were kept from him alone. The princess, after moving into the main residence, spent lavishly. She went to a fabric shop and bought a large quantity of silk, telling the shop owner that she would need even more. The fabric shop owner immediately recognized a major customer. That evening, he closed his shop and headed to the gambling den, feeling more confident than ever. As it turned out, he gambled away his entire fortune. Ba Wu and some of his friends had set up a card cheating scheme. They collaborated to ensure that the fabric shop owner lost all his money. Chun Bi began to practice usury. The shop owner begged Chun Bi to lend him money, initially using the cotton fabric from his shop as collateral for a loan of 100 silver taels. It wasn't long before he had lost everything, and then he pawned the silk. Very quickly, he lost it all. The next day, Chun Bi led his men to the fabric shop to collect the gambling debts. Overwhelmed by their numbers, the shop was quickly cleaned out. At that moment, Su Qiong arrived, saying that the elders of the family were celebrating their longevity, and also that her brother-in-law was preparing for his wedding, so they needed a lot of silk. The fabric shop owner wanted to recoup his losses through this customer. He promised Su Kyung that he would provide the silk she needed within the specified time. Su Kyung then relayed this information to Ba Woo. As it turned out, Ba Woo remembered that when he was a porter at the docks, Chun Bi had been swindled in a smuggling deal. Ba Woo's friend escaped, but was pursued by the guards of Grand Master I Cheom. He suspected that Grand Master I Cheom was involved in the smuggling operation and wanted to use this to obtain evidence against him. Su Kyung remembered that when she lived in Grand Master I Cheom's residence, a certain fabric shop had a close relationship with the family. She suspected that the fabric from that shop was problematic, so she set this trap, causing the fabric shop owner to fall into it. Soon, he imported a shipment of silk. After Ba Woo learned of this information, he and his friends worked together to apprehend the fabric shop owner, and they found a business license issued by the government on his person. The seal stamped on the business license was Grand Master I Cheom's official seal. Ba Woo immediately went to the palace. That old traitor I Cheom pretends to be incorruptible, but in reality, he amasses wealth for himself behind the scenes. His Majesty discussed with Ba Woo whether to dismiss Grand Master I Cheom immediately or to wait for a better opportunity. Ba Woo felt that it was better to dismiss Grand Master I Cheom first. Otherwise, Grand Master I Cheom might come up with more schemes. His Majesty thought for a moment and agreed that it was better to do so. Thus, Grand Master I Cheom was dismissed, and there was nothing he could do about it. His son had no talent, took risks for money, and ultimately was defeated by Ba Woo. Actually, Ba Woo didn't want to resort to action so quickly. It's just that while he was participating in the civil service exam, Grand Scholar I Cheom had someone use underhanded tactics, nearly taking Ba Woo's life. Fortunately, His Royal Highness discovered Grand Scholar I Cheom's treacherous act in time and ordered Grand Scholar Kim Ja-jeom to provide Ba Woo with a bulletproof vest beforehand. Although he was injured, luckily it wasn't life-threatening. Ba Woo never expected Grand Scholar I Cheom to be so impatient to take his life. So, he wanted to do something to let Grand Scholar I Cheom know that he wasn't a weakling, and that he knew how to fight back. Grand Scholar I Cheom was dismissed from his position, and he couldn't just ignore that. He still wanted to cling to a final opportunity, so he bribed the royal physician to poison His Royal Highness. After taking the medicine, His Royal Highness became unconscious. Grand Scholar I Cheom quickly seized the opportunity, instigating the court officials. The nation cannot be without a ruler for even a day, and sought out the crown prince to represent the throne, listening to governance. Court Lady Kim, with her keen intellect, sensed that there was something wrong with the His Royal Highness medicine, and ordered the guard close to His Royal Highness to kill the royal physician. Grand Scholar I Cheom didn't care at all. Killing the royal physician achieved his ultimate goal. The crown prince assumed regency. But this didn't solve anything, as the first thing he did upon ascending to the throne was to reinstate Grand Scholar I Cheom to his former position. The suffering of His Royal Highness and Ba Woo seemed to have vanished into thin air. Ba Woo's sharp-tongued ex-wife, complaining about his poverty, ran away in the dead of night with another man, leaving behind Cha Dal, who was still breastfeeding. Ba Woo and Chun Bi single-handedly tried everything to raise Cha Dal. It wasn't until they met Princess Su Kyung that he and Cha Dal gradually began to have a peaceful and happy life. When the scheming woman saw that Ba Woo was doing better, she returned home. This caught Su Kyung off guard. At this time, Ba Woo's mother's attitude towards Su Kyung gradually changed. Although Su Kyung said she was a lowly commoner, the aura that emanated from within her could not be faked. Speaking softly, gently, not arguing, not grabbing, easily pacifying Ba Woo's younger sister. When Ba Woo's younger sister was heartbroken, Su Kyung was by her side, keeping her company. She was knowledgeable and understood reason. Su Kyung carefully observed that Ba Woo's mother had been urinating frequently recently, so she wrote a prescription for her and brought it to her room. Ba Woo's sister and mother gradually regarded Su Kyung as family, loving her more and more. As Ba Woo's mother and sister were eating the cakes made by Su Kyung, they heard a loud shout outside. Looking outside, they saw a woman putting on a display of power outside the door with Su Kyung. She angrily asked who she was, and why she was laying hands on her daughter-in-law. The scheming woman, seeing Su Kyung respectfully call out "mother," instantly retracted her sharp-tongued expression, showing a pitiful face, and respectfully also called out "mother," claiming to be Cha Dol's biological mother. Ba Woo's mother was utterly stunned. She turned to Su Kyung, searching her face for another explanation, some other answer. But, to her disbelief, Su Kyung told her that this woman might actually be Cha Dol's biological mother. Ba Woo's mother was floored. "What kind of joke is this? Are you telling me Su Kyung isn't Cha Dol's real mother?" She was so shocked she nearly fainted. Su Kyung remained silent, while the woman babbled on, one thing after another. Ba Woo's mother, furious, told her to shut her mouth. Right now, all she wanted was to hear Su Kyung explain why she had lied to her. Ba Woo's mother and sister, through their interactions over the past few days, had come to trust Su Kyung's character. They hoped to understand the unfortunate truth behind her actions. And then, all Su Kyung did was apologize. Chun-Bi found out that the woman had returned, and he angrily grabbed her arm, wanting to throw her out. As he dragged her, he told Ba Woo's mother the truth about how this woman had abandoned Ba Woo and Cha Dol, and then run off with another man, and how he had struggled to raise Cha Dol alongside Ba Woo. Hearing this, Ba Woo's mother was beyond furious. She couldn't believe that such a shameless woman existed in the world, and demanded that Chun-Bi throw her out immediately. But the woman pulled out some kind of plaque from somewhere, a plaque that signified her status. As soon as Ba Woo's mother saw the plaque, she immediately stopped Chun-Bi. Su Kyung was good in every way, except she didn't have a good background. If this woman's status was high, then Cha Dol might later become an official. After thinking it over, she decided to wait for her son to return before making a decision. At this moment, Ba Woo was caught in a disastrous situation. He had no idea about the trouble brewing at home. The Crown Prince, now in power, had reinstated Minister Aicheom's official position. Minister Aicheom's goal had been achieved. Next, he wanted to launch a secret investigation inside Ba Woo's residence. He knew that Ba Woo was the one who had kidnapped the princess, and therefore he felt that the princess was still alive, hiding in his residence. This was the secret, but Ba Woo was obstructing his plans. So, he planned to send Ba Woo away and, ideally, kill him in the process. However, he couldn't act directly, so, taking advantage of the Crown Prince's regency, he persuaded the high-ranking officials to dispatch Ba Woo as a propagandist, to scout out the movements of the Ming Dynasty general who was currently in Liaodong, preparing for the later Jin War. He found all sorts of excuses to request provisions from His Highness and asked the Crown Prince to dispatch Ba Woo to grasp the actual situation there. To convince everyone, he also sent his youngest son, Di Yob, along. This journey was a matter of life and death, because Minister Aicheom had already arranged for people to ambush and assassinate Ba Woo. Meanwhile, back at Ba Woo's house, it was a case of one mountain cannot have two tigers. The former wife, having just returned, immediately kicked Su Kyung out of the main room, took all her clothes, and forced her to go empty chamber pots. Could there be a more pitiful princess? Su Kyung had no desire to cause trouble with her, because she was extremely worried about Ba Woo's well-being at the moment. Ba Woo had been dispatched by the treacherous old minister Aicheom to serve as a propagandist. In order to persuade the high-ranking officials, he had sent his son Di Yob to go with him, then sent people to assassinate Ba Woo, and told Di Yob, "I am giving you this last chance, you must get rid of Ba Woo, otherwise, you will not be allowed to come home." Minister Aicheom had made up his mind this time, he had to kill Ba Woo. However, Di Yob was kind-hearted. Although he and Ba Woo were rivals in love, he couldn't bear to watch Ba Woo die like that. He himself couldn't bring himself to act. He took a bullet for Ba Woo. He was barely alive, then was captured by the later Jin army. However, it was there that they encountered a general who was being held as a prisoner of war by the later Jin army. He had discovered a letter on Di Yob's person, correspondence between a Ming Dynasty leader and Grand Scholar Aicheom. Grand Scholar Aicheom was requesting the Ming leader to kill Ba Woo. The general couldn't understand why they would kill one of their own men. Ba Woo explained, "For power." This left the general speechless. He had endured the humiliation of being a prisoner of war for the later Jin, hoping to alleviate the suffering of the common people. But the court was creating internal conflict and fighting amongst themselves for power. Ba Wu stated that he wouldn't allow a war with the later Jin to happen. He pleaded with the general to write a letter to Grand Scholar Ai Qiam, asking him to work with the Ming general and demand that he not step outside his territory. Carrying the gifts that the later Jin army presented to His Highness, as well as the letter written to Grand Scholar Ai Qiam, the two men returned to the capital with their heads held high. It was generally assumed that Ba Wu and Di Yob wouldn't return, so they did not expect them to come back with such good news. Ba Wu requested that His Highness write a letter to the Ming general, demanding that he not leave his territory. The later Jin would also take actions to support this. By creating such a resounding effect, neither side would dare to make a move against the other, and the people could live in peace and security. Unexpectedly, Grand Scholar Ai Qiam wanted to send Ba Wu to his death, but Ba Wu has returned with great merit. His Highness revealed a satisfied smile that hadn't been seen in a long time. Grand Scholar Ai Qiam, upon learning of Ba Wu's return, immediately went to the palace and requested that His Highness send Ba Wu and Di Yob back to the border once again. His Highness produced the letter that the later Jin wrote to Grand Scholar Ai Qiam. The contents of the letter demonstrated the close, secret relationship between the later Jin and Grand Scholar Ai Qiam, and they had also agreed to persuade the Ming general to help His Highness's army. He asked Grand Scholar Ai Qiam, if he has colluded with foreign powers, then he must go and abide by their agreement and write a letter to the Ming general. Otherwise, when the later Jin attacks, he will be held accountable for the consequences. His Highness gave him a choice of writing the letter or providing supplies, leaving the decision up to him. Grand Scholar Ai Qiam was falsely accused, yet there were enough evidence and witnesses to prove his collusion, making his defense useless. Ba Wu's scheme was truly outstanding. Ba Wu had barely returned before he immediately wanted to find Su Qiong. Having been away from home for so many days, not knowing what the woman he longed for day and night was doing, he was overjoyed and rushed to Su Qiong's room. The court lady Zhou hurriedly pulled him back, saying that Su Qiong wasn't in the main room but was now in a small side chamber. Ba Wu was utterly astonished. Court lady Zhou fell silent after speaking. He could tell something had happened in the house. At this moment, his ex-wife heard the commotion outside, knowing that her days of flaunting her authority were coming to an end, so she pretended to be fast asleep. Ba Wu reached out and dragged her out, throwing her out the door like a chick. His ex-wife pleaded, "Don't treat her like that, because she knows the secrets inside the household. Su Qiong is a princess, isn't she?" Ba Wu's eyes widened in disbelief. This woman took the opportunity to run back into the room. Her shamelessness was truly indescribable. His mother called Ba Wu over, told him to come into the room, and spoke to him about Cha Dal's future. After speaking, she took out the ex-wife's deed. "For Cha Dal's sake, keep this woman here. Su Qiong may be good, but she isn't of noble birth." Ba Wu saw that he couldn't persuade his mother. In frustration, he revealed the truth. Su Qiong is Her Royal Highness, the princess, the king's only daughter, and also the daughter-in-law of Lord Ai Qiam. Then he told his mother everything, how he kidnapped the princess, how they escaped, and finally how she helped them restore their identity. His mother was utterly shocked, but thinking about it, Su Qiong's bearing and demeanor were not those of an ordinary person. However, with Su Qiong living here, they would be in great danger. His mother knew very well the ruthless methods of Lord Ai Qiam. She knew very well how her own family was annihilated by him. Now he surely wanted to kill everyone in the world. Walls have ears. In the end, they would still have to face running away. His mother thought for a long time and then asked Ba Wu to take Su Qiong out of the household. But how could Ba Wu agree? He had fallen deeply in love with Su Qiong. For her son's happiness, his mother could only temporarily let it go. But what about the woman in the house? She stubbornly refused to leave, claiming to be Cha Dal's biological mother. A biological mother can never abandon her son, she said it without any shame. In the end, they decided to lock her up in the woodshed. This time, she became the servant. Ba Wu told Chun Bi to keep an eye on the woman. Di Yob discovered that the guard beside his father had recently been searching for a female peddler. Upon inquiring, he learned that the guard was visiting Ba Wu's residence to gather information about the princess. Di Yob immediately rushed to inform Su Qiong. Chun Bi, seeing Di Yob visiting Su Qiong, questioned Court Lady Zhou. "Why did you allow Di Yob to meet the princess?" Court Lady Zhou was simply following orders. She also firmly believed that Diyob would not harm the princess. The two spoke for a while and suddenly began to argue. The argument escalated, becoming so heated that it was overheard by a woman living nearby. This woman, seeing no personal gain, gathered all the valuables in her house and fled. She followed the female peddler and went to Lord Aiqium's residence. She immediately revealed to Lord Aiqium that Princess Su Qiong was residing in Ba Wu's house. After telling him, she eagerly awaited Lord Aiqium's reward. However, unexpectedly, Lord Aiqium had her bound and arrested. What kind of person was Lord Aiqium? Anyone who overturned his carriage would immediately face his retaliation. Diyob tried to report the news, but was knocked unconscious from behind by a guard beside Lord Aiqium. Ba Wu had entered the palace early in the morning. Lord Aiqium, leading a large and formidable group of soldiers and horses, arrived at Ba Wu's residence. Even if he had to turn the entire place upside down, he would find the princess. But unexpectedly, the princess bravely opened the door, calmly stepped outside, and respectfully greeted Lord Aiqium. She did not call him father, but uttered, "Lord Aiqium." Lord Aiqium burst into laughter. Su Qiong is neither timid nor arrogant, looking directly at Lord Aiqium. "If not Lord Aiqium, what should she call you? Should she call you father? Isn't your daughter-in-law already dead? Because of suicide, or because of a man she never met?" Lord Aiqium said that the princess's personality had indeed changed. Su Qiong said to Lord Aiqium, "It's not a change, this is my true, original self." Lord Aiqium said, "It doesn't matter, because you won't have the chance to see it again." After speaking, the guard beside him drew his sword. Ba Wu rushed over, yelling loudly, "Stop!" and stood directly in front of Su Qiong to protect her. Aiqium looked like a snarling wolf. But Ba Wu didn't come alone. He brought many commoners with him. Last time, Lord Aiqium sent him as a grain inspector, a mission with little chance of survival, but he returned after accomplishing great deeds. His Highness had rewarded him with food supplies, which Su Qiong distributed to the poor. Although it wasn't Lord Aiqium's intention, it was because of Lord Aiqium that we have these food supplies to provide relief to the people. It seems we should thank Lord Aiqium. These words were like a powerful slap in Lord Aiqium's face. The commoners, knowing that the family was in trouble, all rushed over. Lord Aiqium didn't dare do anything to Su Qiong. Although his eldest son was still arrogant, baring his teeth as if wanting to bite someone, Lord Aiqium wasn't stupid. In broad daylight, and in front of so many commoners, he couldn't choose to take action at this time. He had no choice but to lead his troops back. However, he couldn't resign himself to letting this matter go. Although His Highness knew that Su Qiong was still alive, Su Qiong was a time bomb. Maybe one day His Highness would sacrifice Su Qiong. No matter what, Su Qiong must die. Ba Wu wasn't stupid either. He knew that to protect Su Qiong well, a battle between him and Lord Aiqium was inevitable. In the dead of night, Lord Aiqium dispatched his soldiers to sneak into Ba Wu's residence. However, they couldn't find any trace of the family, neither young nor old. They continued to ransack the place. Eventually, they discovered the entire family not far away. Without a word, they drew their blades. Ba Wu desperately tried to protect Su Qiong. It seemed Lord Aiqium was determined not to let anyone survive. Every strike was intended to be fatal. At that moment, Diyob leaped down from above. Su Qiong was the woman he had loved deeply since he first knew what love was, the one he would protect even if it meant sacrificing his own life. His father knelt before him. Finally, Diyob understood the truth. Why he could never have Su Qiong? Why, when he made a mistake, his father would simply say a few words and let it go. And why, when his elder brother erred, his father would criticize him severely. He had thought it was because his father favored him, which led to the elder brother's jealousy. Consequently, his elder brother had always disliked him. The woman he had been fond of since he was an innocent child, yet his aunt had advised him to give up on. This time, now that his father knew Su Qiong was still alive, he would certainly have thoughts of murder. He absolutely had to save Su Qiong and then flee with her far away. By this point, the soldiers had surrounded Su Qiong and Ba Wu's family. Diyob arrived just in time to stop the guards. Ba Wu recognized him instantly, and suddenly, his anger flared up. All that could be heard was a loud shout. Su Kyung didn't understand why her royal father wouldn't directly eliminate Lord Aicheom. Surely, the mere fact that she was still alive was enough to convict Lord Aicheom, wasn't it? His Majesty said that he was ashamed. He was Su Kyung's father, and the king of the land. But the military power in his hands couldn't match Lord Aicheom's right now. This wasn't the time for a direct confrontation with Lord Aicheom. Su Kyung understood her royal father's predicament. She told her father that she wanted to marry Ba Wu, pleading with him to allow her to live as someone else's wife, rather than live as his daughter. Because in this world, his daughter was already dead and buried in the graveyard of Lord Aicheom's family. His Majesty refused. Su Kyung said to her father, "I have fallen in love with Ba Wu. Even if I can only be Ba Wu's legitimate wife for a single day, I would be willing to do so." His Majesty was speechless. After leaving, he went straight to Grand Scholar Aicheom's residence. Grand Scholar Aicheom feigned illness, refusing to meet His Highness. His Highness stood outside the gate, speaking sincerely to Grand Scholar Aicheom, "Let the matter of Su Kyung end here. Let neither side use Su Kyung any further. Consider this matter buried." At this juncture, with internal strife and external threats, the nation's fate hangs by a thread, so let's not allow internal conflict, mutual suspicion, and animosity to prevail. His Highness needs Grand Scholar Aicheom's assistance to build a strong nation. These words were abundantly clear. His Highness was offering Grand Scholar Aicheom a way out. Only, the old man Aicheom failed to recognize it. The next day, unexpectedly, he had a placard posted, claiming that His Highness was amassing the people's wealth to build palaces, that he was an incompetent and foolish ruler, and that he was conspiring with his court ladies to murder his own uncle. His Highness requested Di Yob to read the placard aloud. Di Yob complied. His Highness could do nothing. Grand Scholar Aicheom then unexpectedly used Di Yob as his first pawn. He asked Di Yob if he had abandoned Su Kyung. If not, he should seek evidence of Grand Scholar Aicheom's wrongdoing. Only when he had truly seized Grand Scholar Aicheom's tail, forcing him to voluntarily withdraw from the faction, would it be acceptable. Di Yob felt conflicted. He went to his father's study, taking the joint signed letter initiating the rebellion of his father and other high-ranking officials. While he hesitated, wavering indecisively, Grand Scholar Aicheom suddenly barged in. However, he didn't stop Di Yob. Instead, he drew his sword and knelt on the ground. Di Yob was utterly astonished. Grand Scholar Aicheom wanted to start a rebellion, but he himself, as king, wouldn't receive the support of the people. He considered the most suitable person for this choice. It certainly wasn't the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince, upon ascending the throne, would surely seek revenge for His Highness. They would still fall into the next power struggle. He decided to return the position of king to the one who originally possessed it. That was Di Yob. Di Yob was not his biological son, but the son of his aunt and His Highness's elder brother. Di Yob's biological father was exiled to the frontier because of the power struggle and was killed on the way. This also meant that Di Yob and Su Kyung were cousins, and his aunt was his mother. Di Yob, after learning the truth, felt like he had been struck by lightning. Should he hand over the evidence to His Highness, or should he resemble his father, choosing to rebel and enthrone himself? No matter what he chose, his only goal was the same: to win the princess. At the crack of dawn, Mother, her eyes crinkling with a smile, asked her son, "Did you sleep well last night? Did you have sweet dreams?" The son wore a bewildered expression. Mother assumed her son was feeling shy. Last night, Mother had seen 2 pairs of shoes, one belonging to the princess and one to Ba Wu, placed outside her son's door, filling her heart with joy. Ba Wu's family was peaceful and happy. But on Di Yob's side, he was capable of anything for the princess. After learning the truth that the father he had always revered was actually his uncle, and his aunt was his biological mother, while Princess Su Kyung was his cousin, this dramatic and absurd twist was truly unbearable for Di Yob. His Highness and Lord Aicheom were both exploiting his love for Su Kyung. Only his mother could see things clearly. If he stages a revolt and becomes king, do you think Su Kyung will definitely be by his side? On the contrary, she will surely hate him. Besides, His Highness wasn't the one who killed Di Yob's father. The real murderer of your father is Lord Aicheom. Di Yob regained his composure. Perhaps true love is silent protection. In the end, he chose to let go. Lord Aicheom threatened His Highness to withdraw the order restoring Ba Wu's status and also demanded that His Highness hand over the princess to him. Otherwise, he would reveal evidence that His Highness murdered the late king, exposing His Highness's evil deeds. Years ago, the late king had eaten a rice cake brought by His Highness and died of poisoning. Lord Aicheom and Minister Kim plotted the poisoning, and His Highness knew about it but did not stop it, even personally delivering it to the late king. Therefore, Lord Aicheom had evidence against His Highness and Minister Kim. He also left himself an out by hiding the cook who made the rice cake years ago. Now, wanting to exchange the princess and Ba Wu's identities, he brought this up again. His Highness was truly infuriated by him. The ministers who support the revolt don't understand Lord Aicheom's actions. If you want to revolt, why not go directly into the palace and force His Highness to abdicate? What do you need the princess and Ba Wu's identity for? Lord Aicheom had his own calculations. He did these things mainly to demonstrate his power to Dichul. If His Highness can't even protect his own daughter, then the revolt will surely have more supporters. His Highness, for the sake of power, once again abandoned Su Kyung and proactively handed the princess over to Lord Aicheom. The princess remained completely unaware, still believing her father was protecting her. She had told His Highness that she and Ba Wu had become a true couple, thinking that her royal father would respect her and protect Ba Wu as well. Unexpectedly, His Highness not only revoked Ba Wu's status, but also ordered an exhumation, using whips to strike the corpses of the male members of Ba Wu's family who had already passed away. This action frightened even the guard who always attended to His Highness. The princess was imprisoned by Lord Aicheom. Only then did she realize that her father had once again pushed her into an unfathomable abyss. She didn't want to say anything more, only pleading with her father to spare Ba Wu. Lord Aicheom threatened Diyob, if he agrees to obediently sit on the throne, the princess will be his. The princess has been kidnapped. Diyob only needs to cooperate and ascend to the throne, and the princess can become his woman. Lord Aicheom was trying to use the princess to force him into treason. Diyob understood this very well and knew what choice he had to make. The princess was imprisoned. The guard next to Lord Aicheom, seeing that no one was around, secretly told the princess not to worry, that Diyob would find a way to rescue her. This guard next to Lord Aicheom was named Dichul. He was actually the most loyal bodyguard of Diyob's biological father. After speaking with the princess, he went to find Ba Wu and told him the plan to rescue the princess. On this side, Diyob told Lord Aicheom that he agreed to cooperate in the rebellion to take the throne. But before that, he wanted to go with the princess to pay respects to his late biological father. Lord Aicheom didn't know what Diyob was up to, but he was certain that Diyob couldn't cause any major trouble, so he agreed. However, he demanded to personally lead the escort accompanying Diyob. Dichul left behind those whom Aicheom brought. Aicheom walked around, complaining that he couldn't find the way. They approached Lord Aicheom. They arrived at a small, deserted road. Suddenly, Diyob loudly told everyone to stop, saying that the princess needed to relieve herself. Dichul suggested taking a short break. Lord Aicheom, still trusting Dichul, nodded in agreement. As soon as they dismounted, Ba Wu led a group of people running towards them. Dichul drew his sword, reassuring Lord Aicheom that he would keep an eye on the princess. On this side, Ba Wu and Diyob pretended to engage in fierce combat, fighting to a stalemate to buy time. Dichul, seizing the opportune moment, led the princess away. Seeing that the time had come, Ba Wu retreated and fled. Diyob chased after him. At this moment, Lord Aicheom was left alone. Ba Wu came to rescue the princess, so why did he run away before he could rescue her? Lord Aicheom suddenly sensed that something was wrong. The princess has escaped. Only then did the cunning old Aicheom realize what had happened. He had been outsmarted by a group of young people. Diyob prepared to return and kill Lord Aicheom. Only then could the princess be safe and sound in the future. He bid farewell to Ba Wu and the princess, walked up to Lord Aicheom, and drew his sword. With this one strike, the grudges between him and Lord Aicheom would be severed completely. However, Diyob was still too kind-hearted, and in the end, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He requested that Lord Aicheom find a place to hide and not think about plotting rebellion again. Otherwise, he wouldn't forgive him next time. He dropped the sword in his hand, turned his back, and intended to leave. Upon hearing this, Lord Aicheom thought, if he said he won't forgive me, then I'll kill him first to eliminate future trouble. So he stabbed Diyob through the chest. Diyob, no matter what, couldn't have imagined it. He considered Lord Aicheom as a father, but Lord Aicheom only saw him as a pawn in his hand. His heart was truly numb, and his life was ending. Before returning to his father in the underworld, he wished Ba Wu and Su Kyung true happiness. Meanwhile, Aicheom hadn't given up yet and went into the palace searching for the princess everywhere. Only then was he apprehended by Ba Wu, who forced him to write a letter to Lord Aicheom to stabilize the situation, preventing him from fleeing. Ba Wu led his men straight to Aicheom's residence to question him.